For most of my digital life, I'm someone who was obsessed with every productivity tool that I could get my hands on. So, it was Notion and Obsidian, Todoist, Things, you name it. There was just so many apps that I was using. For a while, there was a problem that I was using, multiple to-do list apps to do my to-do list, and I needed to consolidate. So then I put a bunch of focus into that, consolidate everything into one tool. So that lasted quite a while. And the reason I did all this was because I actually had this fundamental philosophy behind it. The idea was that there were things that I'm just not good at cognitively, and a computer does it perfectly. A computer can calculate huge numbers right away. It can remember things perfectly, basically, as long as it keeps the data. So I thought, this is a genius idea, which is, let me be really methodical about treating a computer as my cognitive prosthetic. And I don't mean that metaphorically when I say prosthetic. I meant literally the same way that someone who doesn't have an arm can use a prosthetic arm to replace that with something that is similar and can provide the missing function. I thought the same way that, with my ADHD, that there's a part of my brain that is not working properly. And so if I use the computer, this could serve as a cognitive prosthetic. And so what I ended up doing was just being really focused on capturing. So everything that I could think of as a task lived as a task in a task management system of some kind, both in work and in home. And people who if anybody would ever see my calendar and they'd get a glimpse of it, they would always kind of recoil and go, "Oh my God, your calendar has so much stuff on it." And there's, every single bit and piece is scheduled. So I was just trying to exhaust all of these routes. How can I use them to not only kind of fix my ADHD or, help me manage it, but I thought, while I'm at it, I might as well make myself superhuman. I'm making this video because I tested these theories for a while, and I think I hit a wall on a lot of these, and I learned some valuable lessons that I wanted to share. Where to begin with this? I think the first thing that kind of was like the crack in the armor was that after doing this for a while, I kind of silently was grading myself. And I thought, okay, I'm doing this. I'm making my systems better and better. And the systems themselves are getting better and better just because, computers are getting faster, better software keeps coming out, phones can do more now than they could 10 years ago and so on. So my thinking was, what do I have to show for this? And I really couldn't come up with much. I found out that what I thought was going to be the system elevating me, creating more time for me, allowing me to focus on the things that I was good at so that I could delegate the things that I wasn't good at to the computer. What actually ended up happening is that my focus increasingly was devoted to maintaining the systems that I created. And the only reason that maintenance existed is because I was using the systems in the first place. So that popped out this question of, why even use the systems? Does it actually make up for it? And for the most part, it didn't. Now look, I'll just pause here and say, this is just my own experience. And I'm also not suggesting that nobody should use productivity tools. I still use them, but honestly, I try to find that absolute minimum where there is an extremely compelling reason to use them, and I try not to go beyond that. And that's just a general statement I'll put on it for now. But this would be an incomplete thought, and it was for a while, if it weren't for having some sort of a follow-up. If I removed these tools, which were there because I was having trouble doing things in the first place, if you remove them, what do you replace that tool with? And I did find something, and I did find a tool. But what got me doubting this in the first place was, of course, that grading that I mentioned. And it was also this this knowledge about, it actually came from ergonomics, that I heard someone say once, and they were talking about chairs and like products that you can add to your chair or whatever to support your back, back support, this, lumbar support, and so on. And she said, as soon as you support something, you weaken it. And that was just something that I thought, why am I not, applying this to the current situation? So that was just another kind of crack in the armor. And where I stumbled into a solution was after spending some considerable time, basically on vacation. It was about a month of, not exactly vacation, but I wasn't working, and some of it was vacation. But in any case, during that time, I got this opportunity to just step way the hell away from all of my systems. And, I had an environment where I was able to do that. But the other part of it was that, over time, I started to realize that there was this version of myself that I was becoming and I was like coming into that I hadn't experienced in a very long time, or ever, I don't know. All of a sudden I was calm, I was clear-headed, I could just think clearly. And most of all, it felt like everything up to that point, everything was fast. Everything was fast. My cognition, the way that I perceived things needed to be done, how patient I would be with myself and others was very short, and so on. And I felt like in that moment I was just still. And I wasn't on drugs, and I wasn't, meditating or anything. It was just sort of a situation that naturally arised from those conditions. And I really started to pay attention to it. I'm like, wow, I didn't know I could be this person right now. I felt a sense of intimacy with people, any people, that I could muster up these real, deep human connections with people just by looking at them, just by being near them, strangers or people I knew. And then that led to one thing, that led to another thing, that led to another thing. And what those things led to were these realizations that a lot of the difficulties I were having were actually rooted in that. Or rather, they were rooted in not having that sense of stillness, that sense of connection with other people. And I'll skip over, some of that to kind of get to the point here, which is that the tool that I replaced all of this with was idleness. Being idle is a tool. And that is something that's really hard to wrap our heads around, because we always think of tools as these active processes, as these things that plug into the wall and they have energy flowing through them, and they're tools. But in a way, being idle is an active process, because idleness really means that the things that you are making idle allow for room for the things that need that idleness to exist, to be active. And what does that mean? Well, imagine that you were having this really busy day and you had, meetings on top of meetings and to-do list items, and you had so much to do. And even in between that, you were so short in time that, things that were like, oh, I got to do this are in your head. You don't even have time to write them down or put them into your system. And then all of a sudden the police come and they arrest you. You have no time to pick up your things or get ready. It's just handcuffs in the cop car. You're in jail. You're in your jail cell alone. You're all by yourself. And what I want to understand this is you have to think about what happens in that time. You're going to be a little bewildered that you just got arrested, but that passes, and then you're there for another 4 hours, another hour. Assuming you're being fed and all of that. This is just a thought experiment. The question is, what happens? What's probably going to happen is that your mind is going to need to chew on something. Since you're in your jail cell, you don't have your phone, they're not giving you magazines, you just have these empty walls. And you'll realize that all of a sudden, those to-do lists and those materials and everything start coming back to you. They just start re-manifesting in your head, even though you thought you needed to rely on your to-do list, even though you needed to rely on these digital systems and whatever. And I think it's going to go a step further from that too, that you are going to not only just bring those things to mind, you're going to start thinking clearly too. So you're going to be questioning the approaches that you take, the approaches that you were going to take on various things. This is what's going to happen. And this is happening because we are being still, and because we're stopping, and we are kind of starving ourselves of things that pull us into the future. Right? Next things to do, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, or why don't I go check on this thing? And why don't people feel this way more often? It's because we never do that. We never do that. What we think of as leisure, and I'm not judging anybody for how they spend their leisure time by any means, but sometimes leisure isn't leisure. It's actually like, oh, now I have leisure time. I'm going to go spend that doing the things that I wanted to do all this time. These, tackle my to-do list. Well, that's fine, but it's not leisure. Or they're things that, they may be perfectly fine. They're not like a bad thing to do, but strictly speaking, they're just not letting you get into that mental state of idleness that creates this thinking, this mental clarity and things. So, for me, this was watching TV. Granted, it was, streaming and whatever, it was app platforms, but every time I had a dull moment to myself, like if I was cooking or something, or just had, a moment to myself, I would immediately just open up some streaming platform and find something to play, and then just watch that. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but it was wrong for me. It turned out, because I was doing that constantly, and I was stubbing. I was like kind of stabbing every moment that could have been just me sitting back and reflecting, with putting a layer of noise on top of it, of just like passively watching something. And then that really started to impact me. I got depressed, and I didn't know why. And my mood and everything else just really went downhill. And I don't know if I would say it was entirely because of that, but that definitely was exacerbating that situation. And as I started to, I had that month off. I would say, frankly, I just completely vanquished the depression. I just completely came out of it, finally. And since then, I've been trying to kind of figure out how to bottle it up and take it out when needed. But I did learn that, embracing idleness, being present with people was key. So I hope this will benefit other people like it benefited me, as hard as it is to explain. And honestly, it's still something that I'm soul searching on, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I'm still pulled into the, when I have empty space, that there's things that I could be doing. And sometimes I do them, and sometimes I manage to convince myself to just stop and meditate and resist the urge to feel like I'm wasting time. But, overall, to me, it's all about enjoying our time on Earth. I don't think we're going to look back and be fond of a life that was spent just going from one task to the other and constantly working. I think it's those moments that we stop and reflect and give ourselves space, and then give other people space. Like, those are the real magic moments. That's why there is this concept of shower thoughts, right? Why do we have our best thoughts in the shower? Some people say they have their best thoughts when they go for a swim. It's because we're in a situation where we're forced to do that. There's nothing else, we're wet in the shower. You can't use your phone. You can't read a book. You can't, do another thing. We're forced to turn off. So there is something really magical in the state of idleness. So again, I hope that, hope this will benefit other people as much as it did me. And that was, again, like I've been saying, that's a thought that I thought was worth sharing.